So this is teaching and learning part one. Part two is going to be next week at the Simulation Center. So these are the objectives that I want to go over. Some concepts of how we learn, adult learning theory, the difference between feedback, debriefing, and coaching, and why feedback is so important. There's a model of curricular design that's used quite extensively in healthcare education. It's called the Kern model. We'll review that a bit, and then we'll talk about some frameworks for teaching technical skills. And we came up last year or year before with a framework for teaching that has kind of cue cards on it of what are the things that you need to look for, and then even in the back some language that you can use when you're doing your teaching and your assessments of the learners. Okay, so we'll go over that in more detail on the second part. So my kind of gestalt with this part is to try to go from what we were talking before about educational theory and try to go up the pyramid through curricular design and then to a course that you're giving to the actual part of where you're teaching. Okay? So we're going to kind of glance over areas that have to do with design and how you set up a course to get to the point where how do you actually go about teaching technical skills. Okay. So we're going to try to go from the theory into the actual component of the teaching aspect. I'm going to base how we should be teaching on the theory and the things that we've learned over the last couple of weeks about how we should approach learners, the types of learners, and the design that we need to put in. Okay? So these terms are not foreign to you, right? I mean, we talk about formative assessment and summative assessment. Summative assessment is kind of the end test to see what you know and what you don't know and what you're able to do and what you're not able to do. Formative assessment are the things that you learn you're supposed to gain as you go through the training program or your learning. Most of what we're going to talk about has to do mainly with summative assessment, okay? But it could also pertain to formative assessment in the sense that you might use results of your assessment tools to guide feedback and to allow people to know what it is that they need to improve upon, okay? So in the sense that formative assessment is not a test, an end test in and of itself. You might use results of testing to guide future development, future programs, and so on. So there's different, but for the purposes of what we're going to use, we're going to try to use them interchangeably. Okay. So I want to talk about assessment in a general term because the generality of assessment is everywhere, okay? We're going to talk about it about surgical education and surgical care, but it's about everywhere. So my first question to you then is how would you assess football players or soccer players for the North Americans in the room?
Number of goals scored.
Number of goals scored, okay. Number of goals scored, yep.
So being a team work is just only or a selfish way. That's one of the assessments.
So, but how would you define selfishness or not selfishness?
For example, when they go in front and they want to get the goal, are they thinking about to get the goal or just only get the goal by themselves, for example? So if they work as a team.
But how would you define that though? So you want to assess that. So how would you assess that?
The goal is for the team, for example, to win, not for one person to score high.
Okay, I agree. But my question to you is, how do you assess for that? Like, how would you determine? Okay, they're playing, and so how would you say, yeah, he's a team player or he's not a team player? Okay, so expertise, error, and emotion. So after that little introduction, I want us to think about what it means to be an expert, because we hear that term all the time. I want to be an expert. expert surgeon. So what is an expert? How do you define expertise, or how would you measure it? Thinking about the term, well, she's an expert surgeon, he's an expert surgeon, what does that mean? So maybe you guys can just think about it for 30 seconds or so. We'll go around the table, see what people think about what it means to be an expert at something. Okay, so we're going to talk about that a little bit, about the terms competent, expert, proficient, novice, what's the other one? Master. So these are all terms that actually have a different meaning. So just to be competent at something doesn't necessarily make you an expert at something. I mean, that's the distinction here that we're looking at. That expertise and competency don't mean the same thing. Yep.
For me, I think like expertise is still a vague term in the literature, and it doesn't have a specific definition or benchmark.
The question is everyone an expert? Just because you've done 10 years of something, does that qualify you as being an expert?
I think it's a combination, at least in my mind, of kind of formative training, advanced training in a subject, combined with experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of think of, so let's say, for example, fellowship training, just because you're fellowship training, I don't think it makes you an expert. So if you do advanced training and then experience.
Mm-hmm. Because you could have an expertise in some parts of surgery, right? You could have an expertise as a liver surgeon, but be only a competent general surgeon, right? Because anything outside of the liver might be something that you know better than any other general surgeon, no, not even any other colleague of yours. So your expertise is kind of limited to the liver. But I guess the question is, so does time necessarily make you an expert?